Hen labor pains struck. She never imagined her ex-husband would be the doctor delivering her baby. What happened next left everyone speechless and changed their lives forever. The rain hammered against the windows of Mercy General Hospital as Emma clutched her swollen belly, her face contorted in pain that seemed to tear through her very soul. Each contraction felt like lightning striking her body, and she knew with terrifying certainty that her baby was coming whether she was ready or not. "Rebecca, I can't do this," Emma gasped, gripping her best friend's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Something's wrong. This isn't supposed to happen for another 3 weeks." Rebecca's eyes filled with worry as she watched her friend struggle against waves of agony that seemed to be getting stronger by the minute. They had rushed to the hospital when Emma's water broke during what should have been a routine evening at home. But now, sitting in the overcrowded emergency room, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. "Ma'am, we need to get you upstairs immediately," announced a nurse who appeared beside their chair with a wheelchair. "Your baby is in distress, and we need to act fast." Emma's heart pounded with terror as they wheeled her through sterile corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The fluorescent lights above blurred into streaks as another contraction ripped through her, making her cry out in a way that echoed off the walls and seemed to announce her desperation to the entire world. "Where's the father?" the nurse asked as they rushed toward the delivery ward. Emma's face crumpled with an emotion that went far beyond physical pain. He's not in the picture anymore," she managed to whisper between ragged breaths. Rebecca squeezed her shoulder, knowing the full story of heartbreak that those simple words couldn't begin to capture. Emma had been through so much over the past months, facing this pregnancy alone after her marriage had fallen apart in ways that still haunted her dreams. The delivery room doors burst open, and suddenly Emma found herself surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed with urgent efficiency. Nurses moved around her like a choreographed dance, preparing for what everyone seemed to know would be a complicated delivery. "Doctor's on his way," Sarah, the head nurse, announced as she checked Emma's vital signs. "Best emergency doctor in the city. You're in excellent hands, sweetheart." Emma nodded weakly, trying to focus on breathing through the pain that seemed to be consuming every part of her being. She had planned everything so carefully, had chosen her obstetrician, had prepared for a calm, controlled birth. But life, as she had learned so painfully, rarely followed the plans we make. "I need to push!" Emma suddenly cried out, her body taking over with instincts that felt both foreign and ancient. "The baby's coming now." "Wait, honey. Wait for the doctor," Sarah said firmly but kindly. "He'll be here any second." The door flew open with such force that everyone in the room turned to look. A tall figure in scrubs rushed in, his hands already moving to wash and prepare, his voice immediately taking command of the situation with the kind of authority that comes from years of saving lives. "What's the situation?" he called out, without looking up, focused entirely on the monitors and charts that would tell him everything he needed to know about this emergency delivery. Emma heard the voice and felt her blood turn to ice in her veins. That voice belonged to someone who had once whispered words of love in her ear, someone who had promised to be by her side through everything life could throw at them. That voice belonged to the man who had walked out of her life when things got difficult, leaving her to face this pregnancy alone. "Doctor, the baby's in distress, heart rate dropping, mother is fully dilated and ready to deliver," Sarah reported with professional efficiency. Michael finally looked up from the chart, and when his eyes met Emma's, the entire room seemed to freeze in a moment that stretched like eternity. His face went completely pale, and for a split second the confident doctor disappeared, replaced by a man who looked like he had just seen his entire world collapse. "Emma," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of medical equipment. "You two know each other?" Sarah asked, glancing between them with growing concern. Emma's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with the physical pain she was experiencing. "He's my ex-husband," she managed to say, her voice breaking on every word. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's mouth fell open in shock. Sarah looked between them with an expression that suggested she was witnessing something that belonged in a movie rather than real life. And Michael stood frozen, staring at the woman he had once loved more than his own life, now carrying a child that couldn't possibly be his. "When?" Michael asked, his professional composure cracking as he tried to process what he was seeing. 7 months, Emma whispered, and the math was clear to everyone in the room. This baby had been conceived after their marriage had ended, after he had walked away from everything they had built together. Another contraction hit Emma with devastating force, snapping everyone back to the immediate crisis. Whatever history existed between them, whatever pain and heartbreak hung in the air, there was a life depending on their ability to put everything aside and act. "I can't do this," Michael said, backing toward the door. "I need to get another doctor. This is impossible." "There's no time," Sarah said firmly, her years of experience taking control of a situation that threatened to spiral into chaos. "You're the only emergency doctor available, and this baby is coming now whether you're ready or not." Emma looked directly into Michael's eyes, seeing the man she had once trusted with her entire future. The man who had broken her heart so completely that she wasn't sure it would ever heal. "Please," she whispered, "I know what happened between us, but this baby needs you to be a doctor right now, not my ex-husband." The words hit Michael like a physical blow, but they also seemed to awaken something in him that went deeper than personal pain. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had once been his wife, but a mother fighting for her child's life. "You're right," he said quietly, moving to wash his hands with the kind of focused determination that had made him one of the best doctors in the city. "Let's bring your baby safely into this world." Michael's hands trembled as he put on his surgical gloves, each finger feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The sterile smell of the delivery room, which had once been as familiar as breathing, now seemed suffocating. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to find another doctor, to escape from this nightmare that felt like divine punishment for all the mistakes he had made. "Doctor, we need you focused," Sarah said quietly, her experienced eyes reading the internal battle written across his face. "That baby's heart rate is still dropping." Emma's eyes were closed, her face twisted in agony as another contraction seized her body. She was fighting a war on 2 fronts, the physical battle to bring her child safely into the world, and the emotional tsunami of seeing the man who had shattered her heart when she needed strength the most. "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael whispered, as he positioned himself for the delivery, his voice so low that only Emma could hear. Emma's eyes snapped open, meeting his with a mixture of pain and anger that cut deeper than any scalpel. "Tell you what, that I was moving on with my life? That I found someone who actually wanted to stay?" The words hit Michael like physical blows, each one a reminder of the night he had walked out of their apartment, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of marriage, that he needed space to figure out who he was. He had been 26, and terrified of commitment, convinced that love wasn't enough to build a life on. "Emma, I need you to push with the next contraction," Michael said, forcing himself into doctor mode, even as his heart felt like it was being torn from his chest. "Your baby needs you to be strong right now." "Don't you dare tell me to be strong," Emma gasped between waves of pain. "You have no idea what strong looks like. Strong is facing this alone because the man who promised to love you forever decided you weren't worth fighting for." Rebecca watched the exchange with growing horror, realizing that she was witnessing something far more complex than a coincidental meeting. The pain in both their voices spoke of wounds that had never healed, of love that had been destroyed by fear and pride. "Heart rate is stabilizing," announced David, a young medical resident who had been monitoring the baby's vital signs. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Michael felt a surge of relief that had nothing to do with his professional success and everything to do with the desperate need to protect Emma and her child. Despite everything that had happened between them, despite the pain and betrayal that hung in the air like smoke, he couldn't bear the thought of losing her again, this time forever. "I can see the head," Michael announced, his voice stronger now as medical training took over. "Emma, you're doing incredibly, just a few more pushes." Emma's body was exhausted, every muscle screaming in protest, but she found strength she didn't know she possessed. This baby represented hope, represented the future she was building despite the wreckage of her past. She would not let fear or pain or the presence of her ex-husband stop her from bringing this child safely into the world. "The shoulders are stuck," Michael said, his voice tight with concern. "Sarah, prepare for emergency procedures. We might need to move to surgery." "No," Emma said fiercely, her voice cutting through the medical chatter. "No surgery. I can do this. My baby is going to be born naturally the way I planned." Michael looked into her eyes and saw the same determination that had made him fall in love with her years ago. She had always been a fighter, had always refused to accept defeat, even when the odds seemed impossible. It was one of the things that had terrified him about their marriage, her unwavering belief that love could conquer anything, including his own fears and insecurities. "Trust me," Michael said quietly, his hands moving with the skill and confidence that had made him one of the youngest emergency doctors in the hospital's history. "I'm going to help you bring your baby home." The word trust hung between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. Emma had trusted him once with her heart, her future, her dreams of building a family together. That trust had been shattered when he left her standing in their empty apartment, holding divorce papers that felt like a death sentence. "One more push, Emma," Michael said, his voice gentle but urgent. "I can see the baby's face. You're almost there." Emma gathered every ounce of strength left in her body, every dream she had for her child's future, every moment of love she had already felt for this baby she hadn't yet met. She pushed with a force that seemed to come from her very soul, a primal scream escaping her lips that echoed through the delivery room. Suddenly, the room filled with a sound that made everyone stop breathing, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Michael held Emma's daughter in his hands, this tiny, perfect human being who had just fought her way into existence against impossible odds. "It's a girl," Michael whispered, his voice breaking as he looked down at the baby who was somehow both a stranger and achingly familiar. She had Emma's delicate features, her mother's determined chin, and lungs that announced her arrival to the world with impressive volume. Emma's tears flowed freely as Michael placed her daughter on her chest, the warm weight of new life against her heart, feeling like the answer to prayers she hadn't even known she was praying. In that moment, everything else faded away, the pain, the heartbreak, the complicated history that had brought them to this room. "She's perfect," Emma sobbed, her hands trembling as she touched her daughter's tiny fingers. "She's absolutely perfect." Michael stood frozen, watching Emma cradle her baby with a love so pure and immediate that it took his breath away. This should have been their child, born into a family filled with love and hope. Instead, he was watching the woman he had never stopped loving hold another man's baby, and the pain was almost unbearable. "What's her name?" Sarah asked gently, beginning the routine post-delivery procedures. "Lily?" Emma whispered, not taking her eyes off her daughter's face. "Her name is Lily Rose." The name hit Michael like a lightning bolt. Lily had been his grandmother's name, the woman who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident. Emma knew how much that name meant to him, knew the stories he had told her about the strong, loving woman who had shaped his entire view of what family could be. "You remembered," Michael said quietly, his voice barely audible above the sound of medical equipment and the baby's soft whimpering. Emma finally looked up at him, her eyes red with tears and exhaustion. "I remember everything, Michael. That's the problem." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and little Lily's contented sounds as she nestled against her mother's chest. Rebecca watched her best friend hold her daughter, seeing a happiness in Emma's eyes that had been missing for so many months. "Doctor, we need to discuss the birth certificate," David said, approaching with a clipboard. "For the father's information," Emma's face went pale. "His name is James Parker," she said quietly. "He's deployed overseas with the military. He doesn't know about the baby yet." Michael felt like he had been punched in the stomach. James Parker. He recognized the name from Emma's social media posts, photos of her with a tall man in uniform, who looked at her the way Michael wished he still could. This was the man who had stepped into the life Michael had walked away from, who had given Emma the love and security she deserved. "I should go," Michael said, stepping back from the bed. "There are other patients who need attention, and you two need time alone." But as he turned to leave, Emma's voice stopped him in his tracks. "Michael, wait." Her voice was soft, but carried a weight that made everyone in the room look up. "Thank you for everything. You saved her life today." Michael looked back at Emma holding her daughter, at the picture of maternal love and strength that she presented, and felt his heart break all over again. "You saved your own life, Emma. You always were the strongest person I knew." As Michael walked out of the delivery room, leaving behind the woman he had never stopped loving and the child who would never be his, He carried with him the image of Emma's face, radiant with new motherhood, but marked with a pain that he knew he had helped create. Neither of them knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would test everything they thought they knew about love, forgiveness, and second chances. Hours passed like a blur of exhaustion and overwhelming emotion as Emma lay in her recovery room, little Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms. The hospital had grown quiet with the deep stillness that comes in the early morning hours, when most of the world sleeps and only the essential sounds of life-saving equipment break the silence. Rebecca had fallen asleep in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, her loyalty evident even in her awkward sleeping position. She had refused to leave Emma's side, understanding without words that her best friend needed someone to anchor her to reality after the emotional earthquake of seeing Michael again. Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael's face, the shock when he recognized her, the way his hands had trembled as he delivered Lily, the pain in his eyes when she mentioned James's name. 3 years had passed since their divorce. 3 years she had spent rebuilding her life from the ashes of broken promises and shattered dreams. The soft knock on her door made Emma look up to see Sarah, the head nurse, entering with a gentle smile and a clipboard in her hands. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, her voice warm with the kind of maternal concern that comes from years of caring for new mothers in their most vulnerable moments. "Physically, I'm okay," Emma replied quietly, adjusting Lily's blanket with fingers that still shook slightly. "Emotionally, I feel like I've been hit by a truck." Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed, her experienced eyes reading the complexity of emotions written across Emma's face. "That was quite a situation earlier. In 25 years of nursing, I've never seen anything quite like it." Emma's laugh was hollow and tired. "Trust me, it's not exactly how I imagined my daughter's birth would go either. Doctor, Michael asked me to check on you," Sarah said carefully, watching Emma's reaction. "He wanted to make sure you and the baby were comfortable and had everything you needed." The mention of Michael's continued concern sent a complicated wave of emotions through Emma's chest. "He doesn't need to worry about us anymore. He made his choice years ago." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the wisdom that comes from witnessing countless human dramas play out in hospital rooms. "Sometimes the choices we make when we're young and scared don't reflect who we really are inside. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what they actually had." "Are you defending him?" Emma asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "I'm not defending anyone," Sarah replied gently. "I'm just saying that the man who delivered your baby tonight isn't the same person who walked away from your marriage. People change, Emma. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes they grow into who they were always meant to be." Emma stared down at Lily's perfect sleeping face, remembering the Michael she had fallen in love with in college. He had been studying pre-med while she pursued her graphic design degree, and they had met in the most cliché way possible, bumping into each other in the library, her art supplies scattering across the floor while his medical textbooks went flying. Back then, he had been full of dreams about saving lives and making a difference in the world. But he had also been terrified of commitment, of the responsibility that came with loving someone completely. His parents had died when he was just a teenager, leaving him with his grandmother and a deep fear of losing the people he cared about most. "He was scared," Emma said quietly, more to herself than to Sarah. "When we got married, he was only 24 and still in medical school. I thought love would be enough to help him work through his fears, but I was naive." "What happened?" Sarah asked gently. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she remembered the night that had changed everything. "I told him I was ready to start trying for a baby. We had been married for 2 years, and I thought we were ready to take that next step. But the moment I said it, I could see the panic in his eyes." The memory was still painful, even after all this time. Michael had gone completely silent, his face pale with what looked like terror. For weeks afterward, he had been distant and distracted, working longer hours at the hospital, coming home exhausted and emotionally unavailable. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he needed time to focus on his career first. Emma continued, her voice breaking. "But I knew it was more than that. He was afraid of bringing a child into the world and then losing them the way he lost his parents. So instead of facing that fear, he ran." Sarah nodded with understanding. "Fear makes people do terrible things, especially when they love someone so much that the thought of losing them becomes unbearable. The divorce papers came 3 months later, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. No explanation, no attempt to work things out. Just legal documents that dissolved our marriage like it had never mattered at all. Rebecca stirred in her chair, blinking awake with the disorientation of someone who had fallen asleep in an uncomfortable position. Emma? Everything okay? Just talking with Sarah about tonight, Emma replied, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Rebecca sat up straighter, instantly alert, with the protective instincts of a best friend who had watched Emma's heart break and slowly heal over the past 3 years. Please tell me he's not bothering you. Because if he thinks he can just waltz back into your life after what he put you through... He's not bothering me, Emma said quickly. He's just doing his job. But even as she said the words, Emma knew they weren't entirely true. The way Michael had looked at her, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke her name, the tears she had seen forming in his eyes when he heard Lily's name, none of that was just professional courtesy. Emma, Sarah said carefully, there's something else. Dr. Michael requested to be taken off the emergency rotation for the rest of the week. He said he needed some personal time to deal with unexpected circumstances. The news hit Emma like a physical blow. Michael loved his work more than anything else in the world. The fact that he was willing to step away from the job that defined him meant that seeing her again had affected him far more than he had let on. Why are you telling me this? Emma asked. Because I think you deserve to know that tonight was just as difficult for him as it was for you, Sarah replied. And because I've been doing this job long enough to recognize when two people are still in love with each other, even when they're trying to pretend they're not. Emma felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of anger and something else she didn't want to acknowledge. I'm not in love with him anymore. I moved on. I found someone who actually wants to be with me. Where is James tonight? Rebecca asked quietly, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Emma's silence was answer enough. James was deployed overseas, serving his country with the same dedication that Michael brought to medicine. But more than that, James didn't even know about Lily yet. Emma had been planning to tell him about the pregnancy when he returned from his deployment, but the baby had come early, and now everything was complicated in ways she couldn't have anticipated. The truth is, Emma said slowly, James and I, we care about each other, but it's not the same as what Michael and I had. James is safe, reliable, everything Michael wasn't. But he's not the love of your life, Sarah finished gently. Emma looked down at Lily, this perfect little person who had already changed everything, simply by existing. It doesn't matter anymore. Michael made his choice, and I made mine. We're different people now, and too much has happened for us to ever go back. But even as she spoke the words, Emma couldn't shake the memory of the moment when Michael had placed Lily in her arms. For just an instant, she had seen something in his eyes that looked like regret so deep it could drown a person. And despite everything that had happened between them, despite all the pain and heartbreak, a small part of her heart had responded to that look with a warmth she thought had died years ago. Outside in the hallway, unbeknownst to anyone in the room, Michael stood with his back against the wall, having come to check on Emma one more time before ending his shift. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand the full weight of what he had lost, and the knowledge was almost unbearable. He had thought he was protecting Emma by leaving, thought he was saving her from a life with someone too damaged and fearful to be the husband and father she deserved. Instead, he had simply pushed her into the arms of another man, and now she was raising a child that should have been theirs. As Michael walked away from Emma's room for what he believed would be the last time, he carried with him the sound of Lily's soft breathing and the image of Emma's face, radiant with new motherhood, but marked with a pain that he knew he had helped create. Neither of them realized that fate wasn't finished with their story yet. The next morning brought chaos that no one could have anticipated. Emma was nursing Lily when her phone began buzzing incessantly, the screen lighting up with notifications that made her stomach drop with dread. Rebecca grabbed the phone first, her face going pale as she scrolled through the messages. "Emma, you need to see this," Rebecca said, her voice tight with concern. Someone had recorded video footage from the hospital corridor during Lily's birth. The audio was muffled, but the emotional intensity between Emma and Michael was unmistakable. Worse, the person who posted it had somehow discovered their history and created a social media storm with the caption, "Divorced couples dramatic reunion in delivery room. You won't believe what happens next." "This is a nightmare," Emma whispered, watching her most private moment being dissected by thousands of strangers online. The video had already been shared hundreds of times, with comments ranging from romantic to cruel, everyone having an opinion about her life based on a few seconds of footage. "Who would do this?" Rebecca asked angrily, but they both knew the answer. In today's world, any dramatic moment was potential content for people seeking viral fame. Emma's phone rang, and her heart nearly stopped when she saw the name on the screen, James Parker. Her hands shook as she answered, knowing that somehow, from thousands of miles away, the man she was supposed to be building a future with had seen the video that was destroying any chance of privacy she had left. "Emma?" James's voice came through the phone, distorted by the satellite connection, but clear enough for her to hear the confusion and hurt. "I got a call from my sister. She saw something online. Is it true that you had the baby?" Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of months of deception crashing down around her. "James, I can explain everything. The baby came early and I was going to tell you when you got back." "When I got back?" James's voice rose with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "Emma, I've been gone for 6 months. You've been pregnant this entire time and never told me?" The silence stretched between them like an ocean, filled with all the words that should have been said months ago. Emma had convinced herself she was protecting James by not telling him about the pregnancy while he was deployed, not wanting to distract him from staying safe in a dangerous place. But now she realized how selfish that decision had been. "The video," James said quietly, "shows you with another man. The comments say he's your ex-husband." "James, it's not what it looks like," Emma said desperately, even though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "He was just the doctor on duty. It was a coincidence." "A coincidence?" James's laugh was bitter and unlike anything she had heard from him before. "Emma, I watched that video. Whatever happened between you two in that room, it wasn't just medical care." Emma felt tears streaming down her face as Lily stirred in her arms, as if sensing her mother's distress. "Please don't do this over the phone. When you come home, we can talk face to face and work everything out." "That's just it, Emma," James said, his voice breaking with exhaustion and disappointment. "I don't think I can come home to this. I thought we were building something real together. But how can I trust someone who hid something this important from me?" "James, please," Emma began, but the line had already gone dead. Rebecca watched her best friend crumble, recognizing the look of someone whose carefully constructed new life was falling apart piece by piece. "Emma, breathe. This isn't the end of the world." "Isn't it?" Emma sobbed, holding Lily closer as if her daughter's presence could somehow anchor her to sanity. "James was my chance at a normal, stable relationship. He was my proof that I could move on from Michael and build something healthy." "Maybe that was the problem," Rebecca said gently. "Maybe you were with James for the wrong reasons." Before Emma could respond, there was a knock on her hospital room door. She expected to see Sarah or another nurse, but instead, a man in an expensive suit entered with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Emma Thompson?" he asked, consulting a tablet in his hands. "I'm Marcus Webb from Channel 7 News. We'd like to offer you an exclusive interview about your viral hospital reunion. The public is fascinated by your story." "Get out," Rebecca said immediately, standing up with protective fury. "She's not talking to any reporters." "We're prepared to offer substantial compensation," Marcus continued, seemingly unbothered by Rebecca's hostility. "This story has all the elements that capture public attention. Lost love, dramatic timing, new motherhood. People want to hear your side." Emma stared at the reporter, realizing that her life had become entertainment for strangers. Her pain transformed into content for people who didn't know or care about the real human cost of viral fame. "I said get out." Rebecca moved toward the door, clearly prepared to physically escort the reporter if necessary. "Think about it," Marcus said as he backed toward the exit. "The story is already out there. You can either control the narrative or let other people tell it for you." After he left, Emma sat in stunned silence, processing how quickly her world had spiraled beyond her control. The video had been viewed over 1 million times in less than 12 hours, and the comments section was filled with people debating whether she and Michael belonged together. criticizing her for being with James and making assumptions about her character based on a few seconds of footage. "I need to get out of here," Emma said suddenly, her voice filled with determination that surprised both her and Rebecca. "I need to take Lily home and figure out how to fix this mess. The doctor said you should stay another day for observation," Rebecca protested. "I'm fine," Emma insisted, already moving to get dressed. "What I need is to get away from cameras and reporters and people who think my life is their entertainment." As Emma prepared to leave the hospital, she had no idea that Michael was in his office 3 floors above, staring at the same viral video that had destroyed her morning. The comments were brutal, with some people praising him as a hero for delivering his ex-wife's baby, while others criticized him for the obvious emotional connection that the video had captured. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the hospital administrator, had called him into an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. The hospital was receiving calls from reporters, and the administration was concerned about how the viral attention might affect their reputation. "Michael, we need to discuss damage control," Dr. Hayes said, her voice carrying the weight of someone dealing with an unprecedented situation. "This video has put both you and the hospital in a very delicate position." "I did my job," Michael said quietly, his eyes still focused on his phone screen, where he could see Emma's face frozen in a moment of vulnerability that should never have been shared with the world. "I delivered a baby safely. Everything else is personal. Unfortunately, personal and professional aren't separate when videos go viral," Dr. Hayes replied. "We've had 3 news stations call asking for interviews, and the hospital's social media is being flooded with comments about this situation." Michael felt a surge of anger that had nothing to do with his career and everything to do with Emma's privacy being violated. "What are you asking me to do?" "We think it might be best if you took some time off while this dies down," Dr. Hayes said carefully. "Just until the media attention moves on to something else." The suggestion felt like a punch to the stomach. Michael's work was the only thing that had kept him functional over the past 3 years, the only place where he felt like he was making a positive difference in the world. Now even that was being taken away because of a moment of authentic human connection that someone had decided to exploit for internet fame. "How long?" Michael asked. 2 weeks, maybe a month. However long it takes for people to forget about this and move on to the next viral sensation." As Michael cleaned out his office, preparing for an unwanted leave of absence, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma facing this media storm while trying to care for a newborn baby. The protective instincts that had been dormant for 3 years suddenly roared to life, and he found himself making a decision that would change everything once again. He was going to find Emma and make sure she and Lily were okay, regardless of the consequences to himself or his carefully rebuilt life. Some mistakes couldn't be undone, but maybe some damage could still be repaired. Emma Martinez clutched Lily close to her chest as she stepped out of the hospital's back exit, hoping to avoid the reporters who had gathered near the main entrance. Rebecca had called ahead to arrange this discreet departure, but nothing could have prepared Emma for what awaited her in the parking garage. Michael stood beside his car, still wearing his hospital scrubs, his face etched with the same exhaustion and emotional turmoil that Emma felt in every fiber of her being. When their eyes met across the concrete expanse, time seemed to freeze in a moment that felt both inevitable and impossible. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as Rebecca positioned herself protectively between them. "I saw the video," Michael said, his words heavy with regret and something that might have been shame. "I know this is my fault. If I hadn't been your doctor last night, none of this would have happened." Emma felt anger and pain warring in her chest as she looked at the man who had once been her entire world. "You think this is about the video? Michael, you destroyed my relationship with James. The father of my daughter may never come home because of what people saw between us." The words hit Michael like physical blows, each one a reminder of the chaos his presence had brought into Emma's carefully rebuilt life. "I know I have no right to ask, but please let me help fix this. The reporters, the media attention. I can make it stop." "How?" Rebecca demanded, her voice sharp with skepticism. "How exactly do you plan to unviral a video that's been seen by millions of people?" Michael pulled out his phone, showing them a prepared statement that he had spent hours crafting. "I'm going to hold a press conference. I'll tell them that what happened last night was purely professional. that any emotion they saw was simply the stress of an emergency medical situation. I'll make it clear that we're both moved on with our lives and ask for your privacy to be respected. Emma stared at the statement, recognizing in his carefully chosen words the same analytical approach that had characterized their marriage. Michael had always believed that problems could be solved with logic and careful planning, that emotions were complications to be managed rather than truths to be acknowledged. "You want to lie," Emma said quietly. "You want to stand in front of cameras and pretend that what happened between us meant nothing. If that's what it takes to give you your life back, then yes," Michael replied without hesitation. "Emma, I walked away from you once because I was too afraid to fight for what we had. I won't make that mistake again. If lying to the world helps you and Lily have the peace you deserve, then that's what I'll do." The parking garage fell silent, except for the distant sound of traffic and Lily's soft breathing. Emma found herself studying Michael's face, seeing exhaustion and determination in equal measure. This was a different man from the one who had left her with divorce papers and empty promises. This Michael was willing to sacrifice his own truth to protect her, even though it would mean denying the connection that everyone had seen in that viral video. "There's something else," Michael continued, his voice growing even quieter. "The hospital has placed me on administrative leave because of the media attention. My career is already damaged. Don't let yours be destroyed too." Emma felt her heart break a little more as she realized the full scope of what Michael was offering. He was willing to lie publicly about the most emotionally significant moment they had shared in 3 years, willing to minimize their history and his own feelings, all to try to undo the damage that his presence had caused. "Michael," Emma said, her voice thick with unshed tears, "why are you doing this? Why now, after all this time?" "Because seeing you again reminded me of who I used to be before fear turned me into a coward," Michael replied, his composure finally cracking. "Because watching you hold Lily last night made me realize that I didn't just lose a wife when I walked away from our marriage. I lost the chance to be the man you deserved, the father our children deserved." The admission hung between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. Emma felt 3 years of carefully constructed emotional walls beginning to crumble as she heard the raw honesty in Michael's voice. "Our children," Emma repeated, her voice barely audible. "The children we talked about having," Michael clarified, his eyes filling with tears he had been holding back for hours. "The family we planned before I got scared and destroyed everything we had built together." Rebecca watched the exchange with growing alarm, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. "Emma, don't do this to yourself. Don't let him back into your head when you're vulnerable." But Emma was no longer listening to anyone except the man standing before her, offering to sacrifice his own truth to protect hers. "What if I don't want you to lie?" she asked suddenly, surprising everyone, including herself. "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "What if I'm tired of pretending that last night didn't matter? What if I'm tired of building my life on the foundation of trying to forget you?" Emma's voice grew stronger with each word, as if speaking these truths aloud was giving her permission to finally acknowledge them. "Emma, you're not thinking clearly," Rebecca warned. "You just had a baby, James broke up with you, and now you're making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. Maybe that's exactly what I need to do," Emma replied, looking directly into Michael's eyes. "Maybe I've been making logical decisions for 3 years, and all it's gotten me is a relationship with a man I cared about but never truly loved." Michael felt his heart stop as he processed what Emma was saying. "Are you sure? Because once we acknowledge what's really between us, there's no going back to pretending it doesn't exist." Emma looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that her mother was standing at a crossroads that would determine the course of all their lives. "I'm tired of pretending, Michael. I'm tired of being safe and practical and protecting myself from feeling too much." "Then what do you want to do?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse with hope and terror in equal measure. "I want you to tell the truth at that press conference," Emma said, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. "I want you to tell them that we were married, that we still care about each other, and that sometimes life gives you unexpected second chances." Rebecca stared at her best friend in shock. "Emma, think about what you're saying. If you do this, there's no going back. James will never forgive you, and you'll be starting over with a man who already broke your heart once." "You're right," Emma acknowledged, her voice calm with a certainty that surprised her. But maybe starting over is exactly what we both need. Maybe we needed to lose each other to understand what we actually had. Michael stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. Are you sure? Because I won't survive losing you again. If we do this, if we try to rebuild what we had, I need you to know that I'm not the same person who walked away from our marriage. I've spent 3 years learning how to be brave enough to fight for what matters. Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at the man who had once been her entire world, seeing in his eyes the same love that had drawn her to him in that college library so many years ago. Then fight for us, Michael. Fight for the family we could still be. As Michael reached out to gently touch Lily's tiny hand, Emma realized that sometimes the most incredible thing a person can do is choose love over fear, hope over safety, and the possibility of a beautiful future over the guarantee of a predictable one. The press conference that would change everything was still hours away, but the real transformation had already begun in a hospital parking garage, where 2 people decided to stop running from their past and start building their future together. The press conference was scheduled for 3 o'clock that afternoon at Mercy General Hospital, giving Michael and Emma just enough time to prepare for what would either be the beginning of their second chance or the final destruction of any privacy they had left. Emma sat in Michael's apartment, the same space they had once shared as newlyweds, feeding Lily while trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken in less than 24 hours. The apartment looked almost exactly as it had when she lived there, except for the absence of her paintings on the walls and the wedding photos that had once filled every surface. Michael had kept everything neutral and impersonal, as if he had been living in a temporary space rather than a home. I never changed anything, Michael said quietly, noticing Emma's gaze wandering around the familiar rooms. I kept thinking that if I left everything the same, maybe someday you would come back and it would feel like home again. Emma felt her heart constrict at the admission. Michael, you can't live in the past like that. It's not healthy. I know, he replied, sitting across from her with his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. But letting go of you felt like giving up on the only real happiness I had ever known. Before Emma could respond, her phone rang with a call that made her stomach drop with dread. The caller ID showed Dr. Patricia Hayes, the hospital administrator, who had undoubtedly seen the viral video and needed to discuss the situation with the woman at the center of the media storm. Emma Martinez? Dr. Hayes' voice was professional but strained. I'm calling about the video that's been circulating online. We need to discuss how this situation affects your employment with our graphic design contractor. Emma had forgotten that her freelance work included designing materials for Mercy General Hospital. The connection meant that her personal drama was now potentially affecting her professional relationships in ways she hadn't anticipated. Dr. Hayes, I understand your concern, Emma said carefully, but my personal life has nothing to do with the quality of my work. Unfortunately, Emma, when personal situations become public spectacles, they can impact institutional relationships, Dr. Hayes replied. We've received calls from board members asking about our association with the people in that video. The words felt like a slap in the face. Emma realized that the viral attention wasn't just affecting her relationship with James or her emotional well-being. It was threatening her ability to support herself and Lily financially. What are you saying exactly? Emma asked, though she dreaded the answer. We're going to need to suspend our working relationship until this media attention dies down, Dr. Hayes said with what sounded like genuine regret. I'm sorry, Emma, but the hospital's reputation has to be our primary concern. When Emma hung up the phone, she felt the weight of how quickly her entire life was unraveling. In one day, she had lost her relationship with James, faced potential career consequences, and now was about to expose herself to even more public scrutiny by telling the truth about her feelings for Michael. What happened? Michael asked, reading the distress in her expression. I just lost my biggest client because of the video, Emma said, her voice hollow with disbelief. The hospital doesn't want to be associated with the media spectacle that my life has become. Michael felt rage building in his chest, not at Emma, but at the way the world seemed determined to punish her for a moment of authentic human connection that she hadn't asked to be recorded or shared. This is exactly why I wanted to lie at the press conference. I wanted to protect you from consequences like this. No, Emma said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. I won't let fear make my decisions anymore. That's what destroyed our marriage the first time. You were so afraid of what might happen that you gave up on what we actually had. Michael stared at her, seeing a strength and determination that reminded him of why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. Emma had always been the brave one in their relationship, the one willing to take risks for love, while he had been paralyzed by the possibility of loss. You're right, he said quietly, and I'm done being afraid too. At exactly 3 o'clock, Michael and Emma walked into the hospital's main conference room, where dozens of reporters and camera crews had gathered for what many expected to be a standard damage control press conference. Emma carried Lily in her arms, the baby's presence serving as both a shield and a reminder of what was truly important. The room fell silent as they took their seats at the table, every camera focused on their faces, every reporter ready to capture whatever words would come next. Michael looked at Emma one last time, giving her the chance to change her mind, but she nodded with determination that made his heart swell with pride and love. Thank you all for coming, Michael began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. Yesterday, a video was recorded and shared without our knowledge or consent, showing a deeply personal moment during a medical emergency. Rather than let others define what you saw, we want to tell you the truth ourselves. The reporters leaned forward, sensing that this would not be the standard denial they had expected. Emma Martinez is my ex-wife, Michael continued, his eyes never leaving her face. We were divorced 3 years ago because I was too afraid of commitment and responsibility to be the husband she deserved. Yesterday, when she went into premature labor, I was the emergency doctor on duty. Emma took a deep breath and leaned toward the microphone. What you saw in that video was real. The emotion, the history, the connection, all of it was genuine. We didn't plan for this to happen, but sometimes life gives you moments that force you to confront truths you've been avoiding. Are you saying you're getting back together? Called out a reporter from the back of the room. Emma and Michael looked at each other, and in that moment, surrounded by cameras and strangers, they both knew that their answer would determine not just how the world saw them, but how they moved forward with their lives. We're saying that we've spent 3 years trying to forget each other, and yesterday proved that some connections are too strong to break, Emma replied. Michael delivered my daughter safely into this world, and in doing so, he reminded me that the love we shared was real and worth fighting for. This isn't about a fairy tale reunion, Michael added, his voice thick with emotion. This is about 2 people who made mistakes, learned from them, and are brave enough to try again. Emma has every reason not to trust me, but she's giving me the chance to prove that I've become the man she always believed I could be. The room erupted with questions, but Emma stood up, signaling that they were finished with explanations. We're asking for privacy as we figure out what comes next. We're not entertainment or content for your platforms. We're real people trying to build a real life together, and that deserves respect. As they walked out of the conference room together, Emma realized that for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The future was uncertain, the challenges were real, but they were facing them together. Michael had done something truly incredible, not just delivering her baby, but finding the courage to fight for their love in front of the entire world. 6 months later, Emma stood in the same hospital room where Lily had been born, but this time she wasn't a patient. She was there as Michael's wife. They had remarried in a small ceremony with only Rebecca and Sarah as witnesses, choosing love over public spectacle. Emma had transformed the viral nightmare into opportunity, launching her own graphic design business, specializing in medical communications. The media attention, initially devastating, had brought unexpected clients who admired her authenticity and resilience. She was now more successful than ever, proving that sometimes our greatest challenges become our biggest breakthroughs. Mrs. Martinez-Chen, Sarah said warmly, using Emma's chosen hyphenated name as she brought in a young couple experiencing their own medical emergency. This is Maria and Carlos. They specifically requested you and Dr. Michael after seeing your story online. Maria was in early labor, terrified and alone, much like Emma had been months before. Carlos held her hand, whispering reassurances in Spanish while tears streamed down his face. We saw your video, Maria said to Emma in broken English. You show us that love can survive anything, that families can heal. Emma felt her heart swell as she realized the profound impact their story had created. The viral video that had initially seemed like a curse had become inspiration for countless couples facing their own struggles. Michael entered the room with the same confidence he had always possessed, but now tempered with wisdom and humility. The administrative leave had ended with his promotion to Chief of Emergency Medicine, the hospital recognizing that his emotional intelligence made him an even better doctor. "Let's bring your baby safely into the world," Michael said to Maria and Carlos, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned that professional excellence and personal growth weren't mutually exclusive. As Michael guided Maria through labor, Emma stood beside him, their partnership now stronger in every aspect of life. Lily slept peacefully in her stroller, already showing signs of her mother's determination and her father's gentle strength. "You're doing beautifully," Emma encouraged Maria, remembering her own fear and pain in this same room. "Trust your body. Trust your love for this baby." When Maria's son was born healthy and crying, the room filled with the same magic that had surrounded Lily's birth, the miracle of new life bringing hope and possibility into the world. Later that evening, Emma and Michael sat in their restored apartment, now truly a home filled with Emma's artwork and family photos. Lily played on a blanket between them, her bright eyes taking in the world with curiosity that reminded them both of endless possibilities. "Do you ever regret it?" Michael asked, watching Emma sketch designs for her next project. "Choosing us over the safe path with James?" Emma looked up from her drawing, seeing the man who had grown from a frightened boy into a husband and father worthy of her trust. "The only thing I regret is the 3 years we lost because we were both too afraid to fight for what we had." Michael moved to sit beside her, pulling both Emma and Lily into his arms. "We found our way back to each other. That's what matters." Emma leaned into his embrace, feeling the peace that comes from choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience. Their love story hadn't been perfect, but it had been real, and that authenticity had not only saved their family, but inspired others to believe in second chances. Outside their window, the city continued its endless rhythm, full of people facing their own crossroads, their own moments of choosing between fear and love. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of human experience, other couples were finding strength in the story of two people who proved that sometimes the most incredible thing you can do is simply refuse to give up on love. Their viral moment had become a testament to the power of vulnerability, forgiveness, and the courage to start again.